Thank you, Natalia. Thank you for chiming us in, and thank you everyone who's logged in for the sessions for almost a day. I think we've got 2 more sessions to go. We've had a pretty great day listening to topics of sustainability, and to be fair, I learned a lot in these sessions that have gone so far. The other angle, so in the morning we've been looking at topics such as the talent for addressing sustainability, the networks that will define sustainability for tomorrow, and topics such as these, right? So now we move on to the other portion of the things. We move on to digitalization for especially on sustainability, and we have a panel here who come from diverse industries, right? We have representatives from the automotive sector. We have representatives from the chemical sector, if I were to call it, and then of course on the connectivity side as well, right? So I'll probably start off with Frédéric at some questions. When I was looking at, for example, at Faurecia, I understand that you have been working at a lot of low emission technologies, hydrogen being one of them, right? So how do you go about selecting hydrogen? Because hey, there's this whole bunch of electrification that is going on over the last year. You look at France, sold about 10 or 11% of the cars last year were electric in nature. So what's the kind of scalability of hydrogen as a solution when you look at it in the future, and how do you go about selecting it? So it kind of stands out with what the other players are telling in the market. So what if you can share some quips on that?
Sure. So I think this is an excellent question because this will enable the people, the participant, to understand all the scopes of electrification. So electrification, this is one of the major trends. This is the major trend of the automotive. So as you said, it is going extremely fast, even much faster than people were thinking about several years ago, with 11% of BEV share already, and which will go quickly up to 30-40%. And this is putting all the industry, all the value chain under a very strong stress to follow up this trend. So Faurecia engage strongly in this market, and Faurecia selected options which include not only hydrogen, so this includes as well battery packs, in order to propose solutions matching use cases, because the key word, this is use cases. So you have use cases which are well fitting with the battery packs, with the battery, so the BEV, and Faurecia is proposing a solution for that. And you have other use cases which are more relevant for hydrogen. So typically, the mobility for trucks, small trucks, bigger trucks, long hauls, hybrid mobility, as you see coming to the market very fast, solutions with both batteries and hydrogen. We see really, and each day is confirmed, a big market on hydrogen so as a standalone solution or as an hybrid solution. We are working on that on the different hydrogen technologies, including with Air Liquide, because there has been a partnership signed recently with Air Liquide for the use cases requiring liquid hydrogen storage solutions. So we are already producing hydrogen systems, gas storage systems, for different cases in Europe, in Korea, in China, soon in North America. So we are exploring the different segments of this new market. So this is a market which is growing, which is coming, simply because batteries cannot answer to all the segments, all the use cases. There will be a given number of percents of the market which will go to hydrogen, and it will be a high added value segment. And so we are prepared for that and expect a very strong growth of this activity. So we expect to reach between 3 and 4 billion euro sales on this segment by 2030, including the activities we have for the production of fuel cells in a JV with Michelin, Symbio, which is named Symbio. So including these fuel cells and the gas storage systems globally.
And Jeremy, so what Frédéric mentioned about, of course, he did mention that Air Liquide is also working on this, and being one of the largest producers of hydrogen in the world. So how do you look at it? The angle that I was viewing it is, how do you look at the whole supply chain portion of that, right? Because moving that quantity of hydrogen to the various industries that would need it, right? Automotive is just one use case for you. There could be FMCG, there could be oil and gas, there could be in the downstream, there'll be several industries like that. So how do you kind of view supply chain, and especially digitization in this trend, about your digital transformation initiatives for kind of creating a more sustainable supply chain? So how do you view that particular angle?
Thank you. Well, digital is, of course, an opportunity for optimizing our supply chain, or rather, maybe it's the other way around, the way that we contribute to other people's supply chain. And our applications of digital to sustainability are actually a natural extension to what we've been doing for several years now across the board at Air Liquide. So back in March, we announced substantial new commitments to sustainability with the goal of reducing our CO2 emissions by 1/3 by 2035 and eventually reaching carbon neutrality in 2050. And that's a very ambitious goal, given that gas production has a fairly high baseline. And that'll then, of course, contribute to the scopes of our customers, of course. Much of the improvement that we're targeting is going to come from innovative technologies in our industrial know-how, things like carbon capture or green hydrogen production. And at every step along the way, we're going to be using digital technologies to support that transformation. So we've been systematically connecting our different industrial assets so that we can pull operational data from them, and we can optimize their use. And this now covers everything from production plants to individual gas cylinders, trucks, trailers, customer installations, what have you. If we look at a couple examples, Air Liquide has been connecting its big gas production assets for 25 years now, well before it was ever called IoT, and collecting all kinds of data about them, something like 1 billion data points per day across those 300 or 400 plants. We've modernized that approach as part of a program called SIO, for Smart and Innovative Operations, and we've been working to leverage that vast treasure trove of operational data by combining that with new machine learning and optimization algorithms. The objective is to ensure that we can define operating parameters that are optimal according to whatever variables we choose, including energy consumption and emissions. For those assets, digital's contribution is not about directly reducing the CO2 emissions. It's really about giving us the monitoring and the control that will allow those transformations to be measured. And the real abatement will come from carbon capture and converting to renewable power. Another recent example, though, is a program we call Integrated Bulk Operations, or IBO. So our bulk business is where we supply gas in liquid form to customers like factories or hospitals in big tanker trucks. And every year, our bulk tankers drive the equivalent of a round trip from the Earth to Mars. So obviously, if you can optimize that a little bit, there's some sustainability gains there for the supply chain. And our IBO program is leveraging all kinds of artificial intelligence and optimization techniques to better forecast demand and avoid that way unnecessary deliveries, and then optimizing truck routing for the deliveries that we do make. And obviously, if you optimize the mileage, you have a direct impact on CO2 emissions. So overall, we're really working across the board on all aspects of the way we produce and then supply the gas to our customers. And digital is definitely a big part.
Got it. So Patrick, whatever Jeremy mentioned there, the one underlying element would be connectivity, because be it sensors or be it any of the networks that he has to create for delivering that relies on the networks that somebody like Ericsson creates, right? I mean, for example, even the 5G network that probably I'm using on my phone, it has been enabled by your organization, for all you know, right? So, but one thing which we seldom discuss is about the energy efficiency of technology such as 5G. So, in your viewpoint, what is the future for these energy efficient networking technologies, or even the ICT landscape in itself, right? What is your view on that particular element?
Yeah, thank you. Maybe I should first start to explain 5G. Can you hear me? Yeah. Because maybe people have an incomplete picture of it. 5G has three important characteristics. First of all, it supports higher data rates, so faster communication. But also it has a low latency, which makes it interesting technology for industries. For example, remote control of vehicles, remote control of robots. And also it supports massive IoT. And in the standardization of 5G, energy efficiency has always been a very important requirement. First of all, the 5G radio technology is very spectrum efficient. So if you compare 5G with technologies like 3G and 2G, we can accommodate much more bits in a certain amount of spectrum. And because 5G should also support IoT, Internet of Things, it is also very important that wireless sensors, they use the energy very efficiently, because remote sensors, they often work on batteries, and within the standardization of 5G, the target was that battery lives should be in the order of magnitude of 10 years.
Okay.
So now let's look at the Ericsson portfolio, mobile network equipment. Ericsson has been performing life cycle assessments for many years in order to analyze our environmental footprint, our own environmental footprint, but also across the whole life cycle, all the way from cradle to grave, from raw materials until the end of life treatment of our equipment. And it appears that from a life cycle perspective, the main portion of the carbon footprint is caused by the energy use of the products in the field. And that is why we have a high focus on network energy efficiency, so increasing the energy efficiency of our products. There are concerns that 5G will dramatically increase the total mobile network use, energy use. And I must admit that if 5G is deployed in addition to existing installed base, then yeah, that would be the case. But that method is not sustainable. So therefore, Ericsson released its report called Breaking the Energy Curve, and that presents an innovative approach to addressing the increasing energy consumption in mobile networks. So I will mention a few examples of what operators can do in order to avoid increasing energy usage. First of all, we support something which is called Ericsson spectrum sharing. That allows to use 4G and 5G in the same spectrum band dynamically. And that is also supporting energy efficiency. Also, we advise operators to move to the latest generation of hardware, because the new generation of hardware is much more energy efficient than previous generations. In one box, you can support 2G, 3G, 4G, and 5G. And in one box, you can also support multiple spectrum bands. Furthermore, it's also recommended that operators move the 2G and 3G traffic to the lower spectrum bands, because then you need less towers for full coverage. And also, it would be better if they switch off 2G and 3G in the longer term. And then we also support software features. So to put hardware in sleep mode when the traffic is lower. So the sleep mode can be for milliseconds or seconds or even hours. For example, during the night, you can switch off part of the hardware without any impact on the customer's KPIs. And there are many features to support sleep modes. So we apply artificial intelligence also to predict the timing of the sleep mode and to optimize the network. And furthermore, it's also recommended that operators, they use remote site management. We also support such solutions, that operators have a real-time view on the energy consumption of all the equipment on the site and that they can control it remotely. So we have a different number of sustainability targets for our company. One of them is that by 2022, 5G will be 10 times more energy efficient than 4G. For the same amount of transferred data. And the current results show that we are on track. So summarizing my answer, we have a high focus on increasing energy efficiency for network products, and 5G is a very energy efficient technology.
Got it. So Jeremy, taking from Patrick's view was more from a global network standpoint, right? But as somebody who's kind of designing, as an enterprise architect who's kind of designing the IT systems for a large enterprise, how big is the sustainable IT? Because that's been a buzzword that has been flying around for quite a while now. But how much of a charter is sustainable IT for you when you're designing such systems, right? And how does one even think about designing something like that? Because there are the various elements. So once you actually look at a 30,000 feet level, how do you go about designing such a sustainable IT system?
So, well, for an industrial company like Untitled, the foremost concern, and makes sense, is the impact of our industrial operations, because they outweigh the footprint of our digital platforms significantly. One is measured in millions of tons, and the other one is in thousands of tons. So, the day digital's contribution to our CO2 footprint is really not even a rounding error at the end of the day. But we are, of course, conscious that digital solutions overall, in infrastructure, applications, or what have you, they all have an environmental footprint, and they consume energy, sometimes substantial amounts of energy, and there's emissions and there's various other environmental impacts. So over the last 10 years, Untitled has made the public cloud a cornerstone of our digital strategy. And we believe we've made very significant progress in greening, if I can put it that way, our IT infrastructure by relying on suppliers who have themselves transformed their operations and committed to carbon neutral solutions and renewable power sources, including hydrogen. And we've also tremendously, they have tremendously improved the efficiency of their infrastructure, and they're giving us the levers that we can use to really correlate the actions that we take in our designs with the evolution of our digital carbon footprint. And that happens through tools like, Microsoft has a sustainability calculator, and Amazon just announced a customer carbon footprint tool. And those are really helpful to establish that correlation. And so we're working to optimize that digital and IT footprint where possible, and also to find meaningful actions that will engage employees in the overall topic. Because at the end of the day, a digital footprint, even if it's not very, very big in the grand scheme of things, is more tangible to the end users than, say, the footprint of a hydrogen plant or something like that. So in this space, what we try to do is to avoid the typically misleading numbers around how much carbon this or that individual action consumes, things like that. Please go and delete all your old emails or something like that, and rather give our users a frugal mindset. Amazon CTO called it, "Don't forget to turn off the lights." And I think that's exactly the idea we want to give both our users and our IT teams that design new solutions. You have the means to choose to consume or not consume power and energy and generate carbon emissions. So use that power and do the right thing. Just don't necessarily go around bragging about how much CO2 you've saved that way. And overall, these are things that actually digital and IT has been working on for years anyway, because even if you don't put on the green lens, at the end of the day, a lot of these actions just make good economic sense. So I think that's really how we're going about it for now. We're focusing on mostly on how digital can enable the sustainability transformation of our industrial business, and then doing kind of across the board small influence actions to continue to improve a digital and IT carbon footprint that actually has improved quite a bit over the last 10 years.
Got it. And Frédéric, I think moving on to the other side, wherein when you're looking at automotive, and the environment currently is highly regulated, right, across countries. So how much of your technologies that you choose to work with, etc., is kind of influenced by the governments, right? For example, if you are picking up some initiative here in France, is it that, hey, is it because the French government is kind of pushing you towards one direction that you're going into hydrogen, for example? Because I remember we worked with Airbus long ago, about 5 years ago, when they wanted to look at, hey, what are kind of hydrogen's use cases? But this was Airbus, and this was 5 years ago. We see you taking a direction as well, moving in the direction as well. Has it got something to do with the French government that you're looking at hydrogen as an area as compared to some of the other countries which are pushing towards some other direction?
So Faurecia is a global company, and so Faurecia is supporting global markets. So this is really not at all a specific topic of a French market. Today, we see the push for hydrogen in all the parts of the world. So in Europe, in Asia, in America, even in North America, where it was not so obvious. Now we see a very strong push for hydrogen. So for sure, Faurecia is supplying markets. And as you said, markets are strongly determined by regulations. And regulation today are pushing a lot to electrification, and hydrogen is a part of the solution. Basically, we see the global trend and we answer to the global trend. And the solutions are global. So to give you a case, so today we are supplying in Korea, customer with tanks which are made in France, so this is there is quite a good alignment between the different standards globally, and so it's absolutely possible to organize global markets regarding this technology. After the push for hydrogen, this is the push coming from the energy mix, which are determined by the different governments, the plans over the next dozens of years. So hydrogen will be a strong part of this energy mix on one side, and on the other side, hydrogen has excellent, very good use cases in for mobility, but not only for mobility. You have as well many applications of hydrogen for example, to replace the diesel generators for the computer centers, typically. So you have many other cases than automotive for the use of hydrogen, and Faurecia is on these different cases. we are taking the technologies, we are selecting the technologies, the best technologies to answer to these needs, depending on their variability. So you have needs for small systems, typically for cars, which have to be very light and effective. You have needs for much bigger systems like containers, to have virtual pipelines of hydrogen on trucks. You have needs for stationary applications, and so we answer to all these needs because basically they use the same technologies. They can use the same technologies, and developing those technologies to store, to manage, to generate electricity from hydrogen. This is very similar for stationary and mobile applications. And Faurecia is on all these segments of the hydrogen market, and sees really great opportunities in all these segments, and that all around the world.
Got it. Makes sense. And Patrick, I think where Frédéric did mention was about the whole governmental charters of the sustainable development goals that the governments come up with. We had a recent summit in Scotland where countries came up with targets as 2060 and 70. How efficient it is, or it's too little, too late, only time would tell us. But as organizations, how do you go about defining sustainable development goals, right? Would you have piecemeal ones, say, I'll have something for the next 2 years, I'll have something for the next 5 years, and would it differ country by country? How do you kind of view about it? Do you see something specific for France, for example? How do you go about defining that in Ericsson?
Well, sustainability is embedded in the Ericsson strategy and our vision and purpose. Our board is involved in defining the sustainability goals. And sustainability, of course, is a very broad area. So therefore, we have distinguished 3 different focus areas. The first one is responsible business. This covers, for example, business ethics and human rights, health and safety. And we have defined several goals in that area. The second one is digital inclusion, where we define goals for connectivity and our positive impact on society. And some goals, they are more related on risk mitigation, and other goals are, let's say, more focused on the positive impact. And the third area, which is, of course, also the main theme of this webinar, is environmental sustainability. And as I already mentioned, we use this life cycle assessment approach so that we have a pretty good view on, from cradle to grave, how is our environmental footprint across the whole supply chain, across the whole value chain. And this gives us a pretty good insight in the carbon footprint in all the various stages of the life cycle. So that helps us to determine where the focus is needed. So we have defined environmental goals for ourselves, for our own carbon emission. For example, Ericsson strives to be carbon neutral in our own activities by 2030. But also we have environmental goals for our supply chain and for the production operation. And we are also working on circular economy, defining goals to increase recycling and reducing, for example, single-use plastics. And you ask also about the influence of regulation. That definitely plays a role here. On the one hand, Ericsson tries to be ahead of the regulations. We try to be proactive. So, for example, we have been publishing about our carbon footprint already 25 years ago, before it was even required by regulation. But on the other hand, we also see governments moving forward very rapidly with ambitious goals, especially in the EU. And this also puts new requirements on us as a company. And then you also asked about France specifically. Well, in France also all these 3 focus areas are relevant: responsible business, environmental sustainability, digital inclusion. But let me give one example of a recent success story. A 5G project with ArcelorMittal together with Orange that was announced last week. So together with Orange and ArcelorMittal, we will develop 5G use cases for the steel industry and test them. So think about, for example, automated guided vehicles and remote maintenance of the industry. And that will also lead to better energy efficiency and better safety for workers. France is a key market for Ericsson, and we will, of course, continue to develop sustainability-related initiatives, especially together with our customers.
Correct. Thank you, Patrick. So I think in the interest of time, we're kind of running out of time as well, which was allocated to us. Although I'll have more questions, but this was great. Thank you for enlightening me and whosoever did log in as well. Thank you, Patrick. Thanks, Frédéric. Thank you so much. Thanks, Jeremy, as well. So, Natalia, over to you, please. It's yours.